We are back with the 9th episode of My Hero Academia Season 7. After last week's episode saw the conclusion of the confrontation between Shoto Todoroki and his brother Toya, this episode begins the fight between the number 1 and number 2 heroes, Endeavor and HAWKS, against the Demon Lord himself, all for one. Before we begin, if you like this video and want to see more like it, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel as it really helps out. My Hero Academia is owned by Kohei Horikoshi, Shueisha, and Studio Bones. Please support the official release when you can. This episode is titled Extras and covers from chapter 353 to chapter 355 of the manga. The episode starts where last week's ended, with Dabi being defeated by Shoto. One of Endeavor's sidekicks, Burnin, reports that Dabi is down. Now that Dabi is taken care of, the heroes in Kamino easily take care of the rest of the villains in the area, and the news of Dabi's defeat is relayed to All Might and Tsukauchi at HQ, who then communicate the good news to the rest of the battlefields. Switch over to Gigantomachia's detainment facility, where Mina, Mineta, Kirishima, a few 1B students, and Mount Lady are fighting off the villains in the area, and the sludge villain from Season 1 even makes an appearance. Some no-name villains say how the heroes think that they've done something by splitting up, but all they've done is given themselves fewer resources. They say, now this is the generation of liberation, and these heroes will be trampled upon, just like that UA teacher, obviously referring to Midnight. Mina overhears this and kind of starts to freak out, but her and Kirishima rally and continue to take down the villains. Also, she like straight up kills a dude right here. This guy just got a face full of acid. His face is not going to be the same after this. There's then a quick montage showing the other battlefields and them receiving the good news of Dabi's defeat. In front of Central Hospital, Koda, Shoji, and President Mike fight against a large group of heteromorphs led by a powered-up Spinner trying to reach Kurogiri. It's explained through flashbacks that Spinner obtained this new form from All for One, who believed he needed a new power that would suit him as the leader of the heteromorphs. He says that there's no way Dabi was defeated, and Spinner's forces charge towards the hospital. Back at Kamino, the heroes are capturing Dabi's unconscious body. They question how he's even still alive after everything that happened, but suddenly, a purple light starts to glow from Dabi's chest. Cut to Gunga Villa, where Endeavor and HAWKS faced off against the Demon Lord himself, all for one. After they all hear the news of Dabi's defeat, Endeavor remembers how Shoto had said they'd take down Toya together. All for one says, "What's with that face, Endeavor? Is it sadness? Is it affection? You chose to ignore Toya while forcing your own greed onto Shoto. You decided to ruin the lives of your 2 sons. I'm sure you'll try to justify you being here by spewing some nonsense like heroes having a lot to protect. And that's why you'll lose, number 1. And All for One activates multiple quirks, each one forming on his fingertips. Endeavor and HAWKS attack All for One, mainly aiming for his helmet, which they believe to be the source of his life support. All for One tells Endeavor everyone is fighting desperately to fulfill their roles. The young rookies and everyone else are earnestly fighting the battles in front of them. So how can you, of all people, be distracted? Your masterpiece got rid of your failed experiment, right? You should be happy. As Endeavor keeps attacking him, All for One continues, "The thing about me is, whenever I see fertile soil, I can't help but plant seeds. You never did find Toya's body back then, did you? Of course not. But even then, you still reunited with your son who you thought was dead. You should be grateful." HAWKS realizes All for One is trying to provoke Endeavor and tells him to stay calm. He says, "You still have a mission to take down All for One, so keep your cool." There's then a really well animated shot of Endeavor launching a prominence burn at All for One, but the attack is cancelled by All for One cutting Endeavor's side, causing him to fall towards the ground. All for One shoots a blast towards HAWKS, who realizes he can't dodge from the distance that he's at, so he should at least try to save Endeavor while he can. But just before HAWKS is about to get hit, All for One's attack is parried by Jiro and Tokoyami. HAWKS tells them that this battlefield is no place for them, and they'll definitely get killed. But Tokoyami responds, "I know we can't take Endeavor's place, but I know for a fact I can support you and work together as a team." All for One says, "You insignificant flies. I remember in the comics I used to read, there were side characters who only exist to foil the Demon Lord. That's all you are." And Jiro replies, "Isn't that something you should save until after you win, All for One?" On the ground, Endeavor can only think of his 2 sons. He realizes everything up to this point was his fault. The battle, even his wound on his side, it's all his fault. In the sky, HAWKS realizes that they'll have to stall for time until Endeavor is able to return to the battle. All for One realizes their plan as well and decides that since he can't let anything happen to Tomura Shigaraki, he needs to finish this fight quickly, starting with the weakest link. All for One attacks Jiro, but HAWKS uses his feathers to move her out of the way. He attacks All for One's helmet, but his attacks don't do much damage. Tokoyami catches Jiro on Dark Shadow, and she thinks to herself, "I thought I was ready for this, but I didn't see that coming. The hatred I could feel from him gave me goosebumps, but even then my response was late. Midoriya, Aoyama, is this really what you two have been facing all this time?" All for One unleashes a combination of multiple quirks and launches a massive blast towards Jiro and Tokoyami. He says, "You poor things. You must have come here without much thought, like this battle is just a calm school trip for you." HAWKS is able to partially redirect the attack, but he's not able to completely prevent it from hitting the two students. One of Jiro's ear jacks is even shot off. All for One taunts them and says, "It seems like the side characters are in over their heads. It was chance that you two were paired up with such powerhouses, so you mistakenly believed you could take on the Demon Lord himself." And that brings us to the end of the episode. Overall, while I don't think this episode was as good as last week's episode, it was still very enjoyable. The episode had a lot of shots where characters have a thick outline, which the series doesn't do too often, so it's nice to see. I also like how they use the whiteout backgrounds in some shots instead of the standard background of wherever a scene is taking place. It makes panels that were impactful in the manga translate well to animation. Endeavor's voice acting was also pretty good in this episode, so I give this episode an 8 out of 10. The preview for next week's episode shows the continuation of the battle against All for One, as well as one of, if not the defining moment of Endeavor as a character. I'm super excited for next week's episode, as it might actually dethrone episode 8 as the best episode so far if it's adapted right. Next episode will also be entering Core 2 of Season 7, and with that will also come a brand new opening and ending theme. It will be a bit longer until then though, as My Hero's Anime is on break next week. I also want to say before we end this video, earlier this week, Kohei Horikoshi, the writer and artist of My Hero Academia's manga, announced the manga will be ending in 5 chapters. I've been following this series since 2017, and my first video on my main channel was even a My Hero video. Words can't say how grateful I am to Horikoshi for creating such a colorful and amazing series, and I'm glad to say that I've stuck with My Hero Academia through the highs and the lows, and has inspired me in so many ways throughout the past 7 years I've followed the series. I'll be sure to stick around throughout these last 5 chapters until the very end. Thank you, Horikoshi. Also, if all goes well, I should have a few surprises in store around the time we reach the final chapter. But that is the end of my recap/review of this week's episode of My Hero Academia Season 7. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you all for watching, and that's all from me.